Hi, I'm Bakyar Asanov and you are watching A News. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. Trump says he intends to meet with Putin as soon as next week. Protesters in Israel marched through Tel Aviv demanding return of hostages. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev is in Washington, D.C. for a working visit. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that he could personally meet Russian President Vladimir Putin very soon. Trump's announcement follows what he called great progress made during his special envoy Steve Witkoff's talks with the Russian leader earlier yesterday. It will be the first U.S.-Russia leadership summit since former President Joe Biden met with his counterpart in Geneva in June 2021.
Talks to stop the war in Ukraine between U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Russian President Vladimir Putin were good, according to U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday. And now, Trump says there's a good chance he will meet the Russian leader soon, possibly as soon as next week. However, he gave no indication where the meeting might take place.
We haven't determined where, but we had some very good talks with President Putin today, and there's a very good chance that we could be ending the end of that road. That road was long and continues to be long, but there's a good chance that there will be a meeting very soon.
President Trump also discussed a potential summit when he called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to a senior source in Kyiv, the high-level meeting will include European leaders too.
European leaders were also on the call. I am grateful to each of them for their support. We discussed what was said in Moscow. It appears that Russia is now more inclined to consider a ceasefire. The pressure on them is working. But the main thing is to make sure they don't deceive anyone in the details, neither us nor the United States.
However, despite the talks, heavy fighting continues across multiple fronts in Ukraine. Russia claimed on Wednesday that its forces had launched coordinated strikes on several Ukrainian targets, including natural gas transmission systems. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, troops advanced deeper into Ukrainian defensive lines, clashing with Ukrainian forces and destroying tanks and drone warehouses. The ministry also reported that 51 Ukrainian drones were intercepted and shot down over regions including Rostov and Bryansk Oblasts in Russia. Meanwhile, Ukraine's armed forces reported 143 combat clashes in frontline areas. Ukrainian troops struck Russian command posts and artillery systems, signaling continued resistance despite diplomatic activity behind the scenes. Tensions also escalated near the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. No casualties were reported, and radiation levels reportedly remain within normal limits. The plant's administration condemned the attack, while Ukraine has yet to comment on the allegations. The ongoing military operations comes as President Trump's deadline for deciding on fresh sanctions against Russia looms, unless a ceasefire is agreed.
More tariffs, more tension. President Donald Trump has triggered a sweeping new round of import duties, hitting 69 countries and escalating pressure on major economies. With 100% tariffs on foreign semiconductors and fresh penalties on India, analysts warn the move could trigger a global supply chain shakeup and trade war escalation.
More U.S. tariffs are being launched, and the impact could reshape supply chains worldwide, according to analysts. Beginning on Thursday, reciprocal import duties ranging from 10% to 41% will hit exports from 69 countries. The move comes as President Donald Trump invokes emergency economic powers to justify what he calls a necessary realignment of global trade. Notably, goods from all non-listed countries will face a 10% tariff, though that rate could rise. And that's not all. In a major escalation, Trump announced a 100% tariff on all imported semiconductor chips, unless companies are building or planning to build factories in the United States.
So in other words, we'll be putting a tariff on of approximately 100% on chips and semiconductors. But if you're building in the United States of America, there's no charge, even though you're building and you're not producing yet in terms of the big numbers of jobs and all of the things that you're building. If you're building, there will be no charge. So I just want everyone to know that. And I didn't even tell you that inside. We discussed the concept, but I didn't. So it's a big factor. So 100% tariff on all chips and semiconductors coming into the United States. But if you've made a commitment to build, or if you're in the process of building, as many are, there is no tariff.
The surprise announcement comes as the president imposed an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods, citing New Delhi's continued purchases of Russian oil. Trump also hinted China could be next, warning of potential tariffs and secondary sanctions if Beijing continues energy trade with Moscow. Financial markets are reacting cautiously. Asian equities opened mixed on Thursday, with Tokyo and Seoul markets climbing back after early losses. Taiwan's tech-heavy index jumped more than 2% amid hopes its domestic chip maker, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, may be spared. But as President Trump threatens more tariffs, including on pharmaceuticals and Chinese imports, industry leaders are warning of catastrophic consequences, especially for sectors with limited export alternatives.
The European Union is facing growing pressure after US President Donald Trump threatened more sweeping tariffs, raising serious concerns over the future of transatlantic trade. European policy analyst Mark Folkman from the Brussels-based EPC think tank says the EU is now in a very bad position. He noted that if US tariffs rise to 150 or even 250%, it could wipe out 1/3 of European pharmaceutical exports, with few viable markets to pivot to.
This deal didn't really remove any sort of uncertainty from the trade relationship, since he, at the blink of an eye, just turns around and makes another tariff threat if his demands aren't met. So it's going to be very hard for the EU in general, and it's going to be very rough if Trump actually is serious about his tariff threat. From my view, it seems like they have very little leverage. They were sort of backed into a very unbalanced deal. Now they're seeing the consequences of the deal. They've shown that they are not really willing to fight back. They're willing to accept very unfavorable terms, not to have a transatlantic trade war. Trump has already seen that they're willing to back down once, and that leaves them very little leverage in any new fight with Trump. So no, they seem to be in a very bad position if Trump keeps threatening them.
Dozens of hostage families marched through Tel Aviv, demanding a deal to bring their loved ones home. Pressure grows amid Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to seize Gaza.
Hostage families took to the streets of Tel Aviv on Wednesday, demanding an immediate deal to bring the remaining captives home from Gaza. Some demonstrators attempted to push through the gates of the military headquarters before being stopped by police. There are still 50 hostages believed to be held by Hamas, with at least 20 thought to be alive. Public pressure has intensified after the recent release of disturbing videos showing two extremely emaciated captives.
We need your help to make this decision be made right now. We need your help that this time all 50 hostages will be released, because a month later, just a year ago, my family member was executed by Hamas terrorists. She did nothing wrong. She had dreams to fulfill. She had a family who's mourning. Evyatar's family, Rom's family, can still get Evyatar and Rom back.
We're especially desperate at the moment. Tomorrow the cabinet is meeting, not to discuss how quickly they can return our hostages, not to discuss how dire is their situation after we've seen them starved and skeletal, but rather to discuss the Prime Minister's plan to occupy Gaza even further and to continue with the war.
Efforts to broker a ceasefire in Qatar collapsed last month. Hamas is demanding a permanent end to the war as part of any deal. Israel, meanwhile, accuses the group of trying to hold on to power and says its military campaign must continue. After meeting Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday, opposition leader Yair Lapid said he had urged Netanyahu to reconsider, warning that public support for the war was fading and that a full military takeover would be a serious mistake.
France is battling its biggest wildfire in nearly 8 decades for a second day, with flames spreading across an area larger than Paris. One person has died and thousands have been forced to flee for safety as firefighters race to contain the blaze.
France is confronting its most severe wildfire in almost 80 years, as flames in the southern Aude region have already scorched more than 16,000 hectares, an area larger than the entire city of Paris. Officials confirmed the death of a 65-year-old woman in her home in Saint-Laurent-de-la-Cabrèris. 13 others have been injured, including 9 firefighters, and at least 3 people are missing. The fire broke out Tuesday afternoon and spread rapidly through forests and villages. At least 25 homes have been destroyed and more than 15 settlements affected. Thousands of residents and tourists have evacuated to safer areas as the fire continues to burn out of control.
I was a little bit sad, and then I looked around. Some houses were completely destroyed, whereas mine has some damage, but it can be fixed. But for some people, it's definitely over. Their houses are totally destroyed. I have a neighbor down here, and for her it's even more dramatic as she was in her house. So we're trying to keep things in perspective.
More than 2,500 homes have lost power, and multiple roads remain closed. Around 2,100 firefighters, supported by 90 aircraft and army helicopters, are now on the ground, but conditions remain critical. Winds are reaching 40 kilometers an hour, and the vegetation is very dry, which is feeding the flames. Authorities warn the next hours will be decisive. Prime Minister François Bayrou described the fire as a catastrophe of unprecedented scale and said climate change and prolonged drought were driving the crisis.
After the break, we'll be back with the key stories shaping the region. See you soon. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key developments shaping our region. President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev has arrived in Washington, D.C. for a working visit at the invitation of U.S. President Donald Trump. President Ilham Aliyev was welcomed by officials at Joint Base Andrews military facility. U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled to hold separate meetings on Friday in Washington with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, according to his official agenda. The Armenian Prime Minister's office has confirmed that Pashinyan will be in the United States on Thursday and Friday. Following the bilateral meetings, the three leaders are expected to make a joint announcement, according to the U.S. administration. The discussions are aimed at promoting peace, prosperity, and enhanced economic cooperation in the region. Caspian countries are joining efforts to save the Caspian Sea at a meeting in Avaza held during the ongoing UN conference on landlocked developing countries. Deputy Prime Ministers from the 5 coastal states voiced concern about changes in the sea's ecosystem. They warned that falling water levels are affecting the social and economic life of coastal areas and called for urgent and coordinated action. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina reports from Aktau, western Kazakhstan, where the impact of the crisis is clearly visible.
Kazakhstan has the longest stretch of Caspian coastline, almost a third of the entire shore. We are in Aktau, the regional capital of Mangostau, where the scale of the sea's retreat is hard to ignore. Huge areas that were once underwater are now completely dry. And according to the National Hydrometeorology Service, the Caspian's current water level is minus 29 meters, based on the Baltic Height system. The shallow northern part of the sea, shared by Kazakhstan and Russia, is suffering the most. A drop like this has not been seen since 1977. And in the last 15 years, the water surface in Kazakhstan's part of the Caspian has shrunk by more than 7%. Marine life is also at risk. Sturgeon numbers have plummeted by 90% over the past 40 years. The causes are complex, but scientists point to several key drivers: rising greenhouse gas emissions, higher air temperatures, and faster water loss from both the sea itself and the rivers that flow into it. This is made worse by increasing demand for water in farming, industry, and city infrastructure, which puts even more pressure on river systems. About 130 rivers flow into the Caspian, but the Volga plays the biggest role. It provides over 80% of the sea's annual inflow, around 270 to 300 billion cubic meters of water. But decades of industrial development and water infrastructure projects along the Volga may have reduced the amount of water that actually reaches the sea. Environmental experts are calling for a joint review of the Caspian's water balance and for long-term cooperation between all the countries that share this sea. Because the Volga flows through Russian territory and the Caspian is a shared basin, scientists say active international cooperation is essential, not only at a technical level, but through political dialogue as well. As concerns grow, international organizations have joined the Save the Caspian Sea movement. It was launched by Kazakh ecologist and legal expert Vadim Ni. We met him in Almaty before traveling to Aktau, and here is what he told us.
The current trend will continue, then we can lose almost 80% of habitats for Caspian seals, for sturgeon fish in this century. It's a very likely scenario for Kazakhstan, because we are planning the dredging works in the seaports and also on the Caspian Sea to enable more transportation of cargoes on the Caspian Sea. But also we are increasing the oil deposit exploitation on Kashagan. That will lead to the doubling, tripling the pollution of the Caspian Sea, which is already very high.
Falling water levels threaten the entire region, but the experts warn that Kazakhstan could be affected the most. Some are already comparing the situation to the Aral Sea crisis, where years of environmental decline caused major damage to nature and human health. Many also question the effectiveness of the Tehran Convention, signed in the early 2000s. Most of its decisions have not been put into action. And just recently, President Tokayev brought up the Caspian issue again during a speech at the United Nations Regional Center in Almaty. It was another call from Kazakhstan to the global community, urging the world to help protect the largest enclosed body of water on the planet before the damage becomes irreversible. From Aktau, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, A News.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that an upcoming visit from a top official at the International Atomic Energy Agency is not about inspections or checking Iran's nuclear facilities. Instead, it's just to talk about how the two sides can cooperate moving forward. He added that this is happening under Iranian law and relates to their peaceful nuclear activities. Addressing speculation about renewed talks with the United States, Araghchi said no meetings regarding negotiations have been finalized. He said that messages from Washington continue to reach Tehran, but stressed that any future negotiations would depend on Iran's interests. With a new step toward long-term peace and unity, Turkey's parliament has launched the first meeting of a powerful new initiative, the National Solidarity, Brotherhood and Democracy Committee. Our Turkey correspondent Ali Aziz reports.
Turkey is taking a landmark step in its internal security and political reconciliation with the formation of a powerful new parliamentary committee under the Terror-Free Turkey initiative. The newly established National Solidarity, Brotherhood and Democracy Committee, chaired by Parliament Speaker Numan Kurtulmuş, held its inaugural session at the Grand National Assembly on Tuesday. Describing it as a historic turning point, Kurtulmuş said the initiative aims to permanently end terrorism in Turkey by strengthening democratic institutions and rebuilding trust across all segments of society. The committee is tasked with drafting legal reforms, proposing political solutions, and promoting national unity, particularly among Turks, Kurds, and other ethnic communities affected by decades of conflict. It marks the first time Parliament has institutionalized such a broad-based political effort under the leadership of the Speaker's office, reflecting a shift away from purely security-based responses to terrorism. The body will operate until the end of 2025 with the ability to extend its mandate and will meet regularly to receive briefings from top security and intelligence officials. That begins this Friday when Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya, Defense Minister Yaşar Güler, and Intelligence Chief Ibrahim Kalin are expected to present updates on their respective institutions' counter-terror work. In the months ahead, the committee is expected to play a central role in shaping legislation aimed at securing long-term peace, protecting rights, and advancing what Kurtulmuş called a shared national future. For A News, this is Ali Aziz, Istanbul, Turkey.
In a move signaling deepening regional cooperation, Afghanistan is strengthening its transport and transit ties with neighboring countries. Key developments this week highlight efforts to expand connectivity through road, rail and air, opening new economic corridors across Central and South Asia. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more details from Kabul.
Afghanistan Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation Hamidullah Akhundzada met with the Turdakun Seydikov, the Kyrgyz ambassador to Kabul, to discuss expanding bilateral transport links. Minister Akhundzada emphasized Afghanistan's full readiness to cooperate in both land and air transport, while Ambassador Seydikov said Kyrgyzstan is eager to deepen its connection with Kabul. Meanwhile, in Western Herat province, a Turkmen delegation led by Kurbanov Sardar, executive director of Turkmenistan's joint stock railway companies, met with Governor Nur Ahmad Islamjar to push forward the development of Turgundi port. The two sides agreed on the immediate construction of warehouses at the port, with Afghan workers leading the initial phase. Turkmen specialists will also be granted facilitated visas to support the project. In a separate development, Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev reaffirmed support for Uzbekistan-Afghanistan-Pakistan railway corridor. Speaking at a United Nations conference, he called the project a major step toward establishing a new economic space and reliable regional transport infrastructure. These efforts reflect growing momentum in regional connectivity, with Afghanistan emerging as a critical transit hub linking Central and South Asia. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
After the break, we'll be taking a closer look at the working visit of President of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev to the United States.
I want my city to be newest, coolest, sexiest new resort city in the world. And that's my goal. If you want to develop tourism in any country, it's going to be much easier to do it if you have casinos as part of your entertainment industry. Our casino will be the largest in Europe and 5th largest in the world.
Welcome to Dreamfest 2025.
Are you ready?
Let's go!
It's on my mind. It's in my heart.
Baku!
Be ready when the curtain might fall. Feel my heart beating when the crowd calls.
Every year we keep waiting for this festival.
Because it has a pure energy.
First time performing in my country, I feel amazing.
I've been coming here the last 25 years. It's just wow.
I love the city, I like the people.
I'm so happy to be here.
When I come on the stage, they will have to dance.
There's a lot of cool stuff that's been done. We're going to have an amazing show. Welcome to Azerbaijan. Welcome to Seabreeze.
Hello, I'm Orkun Amashov. Welcome to Dialogue of Civilizations. No man is an island entire of itself. Our true connection as species go far beyond digital technology. In this exciting new series, I'll be exploring a vast and fascinating history of connections between civilizations and revealing secret bonds that have helped societies, cultures and religions peacefully coexist. Join me and let's explore together.
Welcome back to A News. As the geopolitical landscape of the South Caucasus continues to shift, a potential turning point is unfolding in Washington. A high-level meeting between Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and US President Donald Trump is generating renewed momentum toward a lasting peace agreement. To unpack what this moment means for regional dynamics, power balances and the prospects for peace, we are joined by Dr. George Michetlishvili, Associate Professor at European University in Tbilisi, Georgia, and a well-known voice on regional affairs. Dr. Michetlishvili, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Dr. Michetlishvili, how significant is this trilateral meeting in Washington for the future of the South Caucasus geopolitics?
Well, I believe it is a super important meeting. We see the real seismic shift and we see the geopolitical landscape is being reshaped right before our eyes as United States very aptly got themselves engaged to this peace agreement, the irony of the peace agreement, without actually meddling, just presenting itself as a good friend, a positive partner, willing to see the conflict finally in the dustbin of history, really very much interested, having a vested interest in seeing the countries peaceful. So obviously we can now already understand that President Trump, 47, in its current leadership term, wants to present himself, wants to go down in history as the president of peace, and he seized on this opportunity. And well, one has to say that this time it was really very aptly done, and when I think the entire South Caucasus and the significant part of the world which prefers peace and development wants to see this meeting actually kind of like occur and well has some expectations. Again, maybe they should not be too high, but the very fact of this meeting and the very fact that United States is actually kind of is so much vested into this affair is very important.
Dr. Michetlishvili, President Ilham Aliyev has often emphasized that the post-2020 status quo is irreversible. How does that shape the Azerbaijani approach to this new peace framework?
Well, obviously, Azerbaijani is today can speak and can act from the position of a winner because it restored its territorial integrity. I think this is a fait accompli. I think, well, some people might question it. There are unfortunate, like revanchist forces in Armenia, but today they are, well, thank God, very weak. They are unlikely to get very strong anytime soon. And I think this is a very important momentum. And, well, elephant in the room, a long-term spoiler in the South Caucasus. Russia is too busy elsewhere, and as is Iran, and therefore, well, they cannot really so impede the process at the moment. And well, this is a momentum, this is a window of opportunity which should be taken advantage of.
Armenia's willingness to grant exclusive U.S. development rights on its territory is unprecedented. What does this signal about Yerevan's shifting alliances and trust in U.S. leadership?
Well, it was a really very difficult, it was like a catch-22 situation, providing unimpeded access for Azerbaijan to its Nakhichevan exclave, and at the same time maintaining Armenian sovereignty and call it territorial integrity. I think it can be achieved. Okay, it might not be easy, but it is achievable. And I believe that there is understanding, and this is very welcome, there is understanding in the Armenian leadership, as well as fractions, I would say sizable fractions of the population, that peace has no alternative. This is the best way forward. For many decades, Armenia was excluded from many region projects. Now they finally understood. Well, I think many people did understand, but now they were maybe too shy. They were afraid of saying it openly. Now there is a leadership which thinks strategically, which understands that peace is more important than some politicking and like some leading into actually mythological past. And well, thankfully, there will be like way forward. I believe that those healthy forces as Armenia will prevail. And well, I'm not sure whether the peace agreement itself will be signed. There will be some memorandum, some document. But this engagement of the United States, I think this is a boon, along with the European Union, along with some other, I would say, actors which prefer peace and development. This will be a way forward, and I think Armenian leadership does understand.
So, Dr. Michelishvili, what political risks and opportunities does this agreement pose for Prime Minister Pashinyan, especially considering domestic opposition in Armenia?
Is an opposition? Well, but the recent polls show this opposition is not strong enough. Obviously, there is about 60% people who are undecided, and these 60%, they are, well, electorally speaking, up for grabs. This is untapped political force. So, but it seems that, despite this limited popularity of Pashinyan, and again, so many people don't speak and think fondly of him, they understand that the other potential alternative leaders, particularly Karabakh clan, are far worse. For 20 years, this clan was actually, formally Karabakh was occupied by Armenia, but many believe that Armenia was actually occupied by the Karabakh clan. And, this was a period of stagnation, that was a period of missed opportunities. And now more and more people in Armenia understand this. And then again, even though the risks do exist, and we see today that certain revanchist forces are supported today by Moscow, but again, it is unlikely for them to gain an upper hand unless they instigate some trouble. But again, so far, it seems that the Armenian leadership is efficient in nipping this trouble in the bud.
Dr. Michelishvili, with the proposed dissolution of the OSCE Minsk group, how do you interpret this move? Is it a final rejection of multilateralism or in favor of bilateral or trilateral formats?
I believe in this particular case, Minsk group had outlived its usefulness, I think, in 2020, in November 2020, when the table turned and Azerbaijan restored the majority, well, pretty much 80-90% of its territorial integrity. Minsk group was about the settlement of the conflict when it existed in the form between 1994 and 2020. I think it is not relevant any longer. Neither are the leaders are willing to participate. I mean, the co-chairs of the group want to participate in that very group, in that previous form. I think it outlived its usefulness in 2020. And basically it doesn't exist. But of course, actually kind of some formal point should be put on this, to formalize it.
So how will Georgia be affected by this agreement, both economically and politically, especially in terms of its role in regional transport and trade routes?
Some people in Georgia included have some apprehension and misgivings about Georgia losing its role of this transportation route. So I believe that peace in the South Caucasus has such a huge dividend that the region will become a very significant transportation hub or transportation corridor. I believe that, and given the size of economy, be it China, India, and European Union, the route and this throughput of this region, different routes, are sufficient for every country. So I think the entire region will thrive and there is a chance for the region to turn into an actual bona fide region. So I always looked with envy at the Baltic states or the Visegrad countries in Central Europe, and South Caucasus lacked particularly that. When the three countries, or four countries, whatever is the number of the countries in the region, have the same strategic vision, they see eye to eye on their strategic goals. Again, they might not necessarily be very close friends, but there is an opportunity for development. I believe that after this meeting in Washington, this path towards the formation of a bona fide, fully fledged South Caucasus region will be open, and very soon we'll see the benefits.
So do you think President Trump's involvement as a mediator adds legitimacy to the process, or might it raise concerns about unilateralism or politicization?
Well, I believe that By and large, it is, I would say, it is involvement, but not as a mediator, not as someone actually who forces the countries, who tries to, well, to influence them with something like carrots and sticks, as sometimes was the case, actually, a case in the Minsk group, co-chairs. This is just a willing partner with, of course, their own interest. Well, we probably understand today, we can agree that like Donald Trump wants to go down in history as a peacemaker, thinks, maybe dreams of the Nobel Peace Prize, okay, but that is like a secondary. Most importantly, we see that genuine involvement. Yes, there is like some commercial basis, but most importantly, it's like Trump wants to be a peacemaker, like peace dealer, and I think that there is a sufficient degree of political will in the leadership of both Armenia and Azerbaijan. We see very good partners like Turkey, which are also actually kind of an important contributor to the process. I think we see everything that all components actually in place today for a progress and for a breakthrough.
So what are the likely reactions from Russia and Iran to this US brokered deal, which could fundamentally shift the balance of influence in the South Caucasus?
So we already heard and saw some Russian reaction. Obviously, yesterday, like bombing on this area from which Azerbaijani gas might reach Europe. Obviously, it was a very clear political message. Unfortunately, by the way, the good news is Russia today is not that able, like, to become a real spoiler. But it has like other, asymmetric warfare, in this hybrid warfare. We could expect, very unfortunately, maybe some more crackdown on the Azerbaijani diaspora in Russia. Some of them are Azerbaijani citizens, some of them are Russian citizens. So we can see actions like these, but these are only it goes only that far in terms of actually kind of breaking down the process and impeding it.
Dr. Michalishvili, looking ahead, what benchmarks would you consider necessary for this agreement to move from symbolic diplomacy to durable, implemented peace on the ground?
I think there's like continued political will. So we see that some requirements, for instance, on the Armenian constitutions, they could wait for some time, maybe until after the election. So I think that it should be a continued political will. So willingness to help if there's negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So most importantly, we see that it's first and foremost is primarily bilateral talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. They could be different platforms. They could be in Abu Dhabi. They could be in Washington. But it's first and foremost about Armenia and Azerbaijan. I think like the leadership on the societies of the country should be mature enough to continue this process.
Dr. George Michalishvili, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insights. We appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for having me.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.